Philip, a great admirer of Hellenistic culture, established power in the Kingdom of Macedonia. With his expansionist ideas and military prowess and innovations, he achieved great success. Breezy traveled around the region and received first-hand information from the marvelous dropperfly, Heracles, whom the Macedonians considered one of their most illustrious ancestors. Heracles spent the night near the royal palace in Pella, the new capital of the Kingdom of Macedonia. When negotiations began for Philip's marriage to Polyxena, the princess of Epirus, later known as Olympias, Zeus knew that she was the right mortal to bear the son who would help Breezy and the protectors of the magic dropper end the terror imposed by the giant Athos throughout the Chalcidic Peninsula. First, because of Philip's strength and courage, and second, because of the proximity of the Macedonian kingdom to the Acta Peninsula, where the giant Athos reigned supreme. Coincidentally, Olympias was a faithful worshipper of Hecate, who, by then, thanks to her many powers, had become the most respected and feared deity. During the festivities prior to the wedding ceremony, the king of the gods wandered around the royal palace after the princess, seeking the moment to accomplish his goal. It was after the wedding, when the new queen retired to her chambers awaiting her drunken husband, that Zeus seized the opportunity to seduce her, becoming pregnate her with their future son, whom they would name Alexander. Only Heracles, the marvelous Macedonian dropperfly, witnessed the events, passing the important news to Breezy through his uncle Boreas. Olympias's pregnancy proceeded very peacefully, while Philip expanded his kingdom by conquering different tribes and some Greek colonies. The day of the birth of the long-awaited prince put all the citizens of Pella on edge. News of Philip's victories filled the little prince's birth with good omens, but it was the infallible fates who gave Breezy their grim predictions, concluding the day with the disastrous fire at the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Breezy and his collaborators were present to visit the newborn. With that, preparations began to end the terror imposed on humans by the giant. The task was difficult, as Athos was invincible in his own land and therefore never abandoned it, but it was not an impossible one. Prince Alexander's education began under Leonidas, a renowned Macedonian teacher who introduced him to the use of arms, and he was later educated by the kind Lysimachus. Breezy took advantage of their apparent contemporaneity to connect with the prince, who was about 10 years old at the time. They met at various court activities, along with other children such as Hephaestion and Ptolemy, for whom the fates had also predicted a glorious destiny. When Breezy met Alexander, she was struck by his resemblance to the divine Apollo, him half-brother. His appearance, skin tone, and even his two-tone eyes were identical to Apollo's. For his part, Prince Alexander immediately took a liking to Breezy, and a close friendship developed between them. From Breezy's neck, the beetle Kepri didn't miss a single comment. Then, through his unique way of communicating, he let her know that he didn't particularly like how friendly Prince Alexander had been during their first meeting. Breezy, with a mocking laugh, asked him if he was jealous, and Kepri, who had turned a yellowish color, replied that yes, that was the only rival who truly bothered him. Breezy felt both flattered and saddened by the comments of her beloved prince from the planet Kepri, who thus demonstrated his great love for her. When Alexander turned 13, his father determined that the time had come to complete his education and sent him to the Temple of the Nymphs in the city of Mieza, under the tutelage of the wise Aristotle. The prince was accompanied by the children of other Macedonian nobles, who turned the temple into a fun boarding school. Aristotle was born in the nearby city of Stagira, located east of the Chalcidic Peninsula, very close to the Actae Peninsula. From a very young age, he suffered the threats of the immortal giant Athos, who terrorized the entire region. His father was physician to King Amyntas III of Macedonia, a fact that explains his relationship with the royal court. During this period, the intrepid Anemoi had intensified their surveillance of the Palace of Thrace, as Athos maintained the threats he made during his defeat at the Olympic Games. However, the cunning giant, knowing himself to be immortal only on the Actae Peninsula, preferred to commit his misdeeds where he felt safe, ravaging nearby cities and attacking ships that approached the harmful peninsula. The 5 years that Prince Alexander spent under Aristotle's strict education were also very rewarding and fun, as Breezy and his colleagues spent time with the teacher and his students, spending long conversations playing drop, since the original game made in the Palace of Thrace was in Aristotle's hands, having been inherited from his teacher Plato. Those gatherings featured the exploits of Cyrus II the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire, as well as those of other great heroes, recounted by the marvelous dropperflies, Heracles the Macedonian, and the Pythagorean, who was much loved by Aristotle and had come to live in the city of Mysa. Young Alexander's favorite story was that of the kings of Athens, beginning with Cecrops I, the Serpent Man and its first king, judge in the struggle between Athena and Poseidon for the lands of Attica, the story of King Aegeus and his supposed son Theseus, who slew the Minotaur with his fists in the Cretan labyrinth, and finally, the venerated Codrus, son of Melanthus, who, due to the oracle's alarming predictions to the Dorians, decided to commit suicide to save his city. In recognition of Codrus's patriotism, no one else would bear the title of Basileus, that is, king. From his death onward, the highest leaders of the city-states would be known as archons. The marvelous dropperfly concluded with emotion upon seeing Prince Alexander with tears in his eyes. At the age of 16, and before beginning to serve in the kingdom with him father as regent, Breezy decided to reveal to the prince everything related to her birth. To find out if he was willing to help her destroy the giant Athos, Alexander was taken to the Palace of Thrace along with his teacher Aristotle, on the magical horses Xanthus and Balius, which Alexander had ridden as a child during his adventures with Breezy and had served as advisors in taming his horse Bucephalus. It was the third time a mortal had set foot in the Palace of Thrace. Previously, it had been Asclepius the healer, son of the divine Apollo, and Diphobe, the Sibyl of Cumae, when they had helped her create the Sibylline books. The guests were led to the great library, passing through the lush inner garden, where they could see caterpillars eating the succulent apples, a gift from the Almighty, as well as some marvelous dropperflies that had just emerged from their chrysalis and were preparing to travel to different zones of civilization. Aristotle didn't miss a single detail of the geometric garden. Back in the library, the wise Aristotle and Alexander were amazed as they leafed through several of the colorful droppy books, the magical books into which the marvelous dropperflies eventually transformed. They were able to admire their illustrations and writing according to the region to which they had been destined. They also held in their hands the adamantine Chiron's cube, which Aristotle had heard mentioned by Plato during his years of study at the Academy of Athens. Then, Breezy gave a recount, providing many details and information that Alexander and Aristotle were unaware of. Alexander was very attentive and serious when Breezy revealed his true identity and asked him if he was willing to sacrifice his life to help humanity and end the giant's abuses. Young Alexander, filled with pride and audacity, offered his life if necessary. Breezy, taking him at his word, indicated that the time for the sacrifice would come, and that, for now, he only wanted him to tell him about the long pikes called sarissas, which his father Philip had invented, and how difficult they were to handle with two hands due to their great weight. Alexander explained their function, how they could be assembled and disassembled to make them easier to carry, and everything related to the weapon, which the young man was an expert in handling. After the meeting, Breezy walked the young prince and his teacher through the interior of the palace, showing them the formidable sculptures created by the Cyclopes, the divine artisans, and also toured some galleries where various objects were collected, including many works of art. From archaic and classical Greek art, there were many Attic pottery vessels, both black figure and red figure, as well as some portraits and sculptures modeled after Breezy, particularly the panel and parchment paintings by Polygnotus of Thasos and Phidias, as well as several marble and bronze sculptures created by Polykleitos and Myron. Breezy told them that these objects would be very useful to her in the future. She then held a grand dinner in honor of the distinguished guests as a show of affection and respect, at which, as a surprise for the guests, the muses were present. To please his guests, Breezy also sang and danced with his old and dear friends. Another great surprise was when the divine Apollo and Artemis appeared to meet their little mortal brother, and everyone was amazed at the resemblance between the siblings. At the farewell, Breezy asked Prince Alexander that everything must remain a secret. Alexander and Aristotle mounted the magical horses that would take them back to Mysa. Alexander couldn't hide his joy at learning of his divine origins and his fellow gods. The young man asked his teacher what a man needed to conquer the world. Aristotle, without hesitation, answered, intelligence, courage, self-control, moderation, and generosity. But above all, humility. Look at Breezy's eyes.